Morning, everyone. God is so eternal and faithful and timeless, but yet He is with us every day. Every day, God was perfect this morning. I know, as Betty said, we have all asked the question, God, where are you? And I subtitled today's scripture as a conversation with God. It's like, God, where are you? And he has answers to that for us. But we're going to start with the Bible story first, and it's a favorite. It's Joseph and the coat of many colors, and it's from Genesis in the 37th chapter, and of course it starts this whole saga. We're not going to go through the saga today of how everybody wound up in slavery in Egypt, needing freed by Moses. So we're just going to start at the beginning with the account of Jacob's family line. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in an old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Well, Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose up and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it. And his brothers said, Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and I tell you, at this point, I wouldn't have told my brothers. But Joseph had another dream, and he said to his brothers, Listen, I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. And this dream he told his father as well as his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said, What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kind of kept that calling, that dream in mind. Now the brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem. And Jacob said to Joseph, As you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks. I'm going to send you to them. Very well, he replied. So he went off to find them, and I'm going to paraphrase here because it takes quite a bit of time. And he got there, and somebody else said, well, they moved on. So Joseph went and found them at the new place that they were grazing. And the brothers saw him in the distance before he even reached them. And so the brothers plotted to kill him. Here comes the dreamer, they said to one another. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him, Joseph, from his brothers. Let's not take his life, he said. Don't shed any blood. Throw him into the cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. And Reuben said this so that he could come back later and rescue him and take his younger brother back to his father. So when Joseph got to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the beautiful ornate robe, and they took him and threw him into the cistern, which is like an empty storage place for water, for rainwater. The cistern was empty at the time, there was no water in it. And then as they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way back to Egypt to take their load down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover it up with his blood? Let's sell him to the Ishmaelites, and we will not lay a hand on him. After all, he's our brother, our own flesh and blood." And the brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who then took him to Egypt. So when Reuben went back to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes and he went back to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't there. Where can I turn now?" So they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, dipped the robe into the blood, and they took the robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it and see if it's your son's robe." And he recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." And so his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, who was actually the captain of the guard. Well, that stinks. Can, can you imagine in modern times being in your back garden grilling burgers or something, and your siblings, especially those of us from bigger families, your siblings come into the yard and grab you and strip you of your clothes and tie you up and, shove you somewhere and then sell you off to a passing motorcade or a passing army, convoy or something. Wow, the shock and the hurt. And God, where are you? Why are they doing this to me? And as we go forward in Joseph's story, it's a seesaw from here on. It's like his brothers do that to him. And I don't want to go too much into the Bible verses because so many times somebody else is going to have the rest of this story in their sermon in the next few weeks. And if I tell you all of it, they'll probably get upset with me. But it was a seesaw. It's like he was down. Then he got into Potiphar's house and he was recognized for his talents and he got put in charge of that whole household. But then Potiphar's wife wants him as her toy, as her boy toy. And when Joseph won't go to bed with her, she accuses him, of course, of trying to force her, and so she screams and he winds up in prison. And then he's got to say again, "God, where are you? You blessed me with this, you told me in this dream that you had divine purpose for me." And then he interprets dreams in jail and he manages to get out of jail. um, well, actually he manages to catch the attention of the king's cupbearer, who promises, I'll go remind them that you're languishing here in the jail. And then it's like 2 more years before that guy remembers, to mention, hey, Joseph's a dream interpreter and he's sitting in your jail. But it's like this is all happening to somebody that had already had the dream that they were going to uh, have a divine purpose. And so I'd say, wait, what was that you say, God? We all have a divine purpose, but that kind of stuff can still happen to us. But it's God says, I have worked through all the ages. You see the stories of me working with my people over and over again, and you have testimonies yourself of him working in this time, and I will continue to be this through all ages. Despite the shortfalls in your human life, God intends good. And I'd say, like, do you remember the book when bad things happen to good people? That was a man by the name of Rabbi Kushner, and he was the author, and he had a beautiful 3-year-old son who was diagnosed with a rare disease of rapid aging. And to have to look at your child and say, they're they're never going to marry, they're never going to bear children, they're never going to live past their teen years. Where are you, God? And God says, I'm with you now and I'm with you always. And I say, like all of us humans, that's too much. You can't be everywhere, every minute with all of us. But God's always nearer than you think. That love bond between us and our Creator is something that cannot be severed. We are bound to Him, and that union is eternal, even if it's invisible. And turning to Him isn't an escape from reality. It's a turning to your real self, your real life that you can have in God. Even then, as you said, Betty, it's like, and I look over at your little square where your face is, like, like you can see me, but it's like there's people at the edge of their means right now. Well, and always that their paychecks have been cut and there's no way to save money even from 100 past paychecks because they're living at the edge anyway. And God says, do not multiply your suffering by worrying about the same bad scenarios over and over. Just trust in me day by day. Well, God, where are you when it's stage 4 cancer or someone crippled by anxiety and depression, or when our housing insecurities turn to homelessness? Just among us church members, and we're not a large group, we're 60, 70 of us. It's like, look at all the prayer requests and needs that people we know have all the time. And God says, I am with you. This is your human life. I'm in all facets and stages of life, the good and the bad. The universe is 13 some billion years old, and only 200,000 of those years has been some form of mankind, our ancestors. But as big as those numbers are, God says, I am with you always. I am the author and creator. My purposes aren't constrained by the timeline you experience on your planet Earth. You orbit around the sun and stars, but rest those individual cares in me and rejoice in me and be at peace in me. And I still have that questioning. It's not just individuals, it's full on evil when we think back to the victims of World War II, where it wasn't just the people he didn't like, but anybody that tried to stand in Hitler's way also became the enemy. How do you stand against that evil? And God says, what can stand against me? The triumph over evil has already been won. Love ultimately wins. That love we sang about in the songs, that love in everyday God. But when is this going to happen? In the meantime, what about the crises we have going on right now? When the death of someone should have been prevented, and our hatred is so systemic we don't even realize that as we look in other people's faces that we're not seeing them as God's children. We look for beauty, we talk about the sunrises and the sunsets, the green grass, the fertile fields. It makes me feel so close to God, but he wants us to see all others as if we were looking through God's eyes. We need to meet their needs as we would have ours met. God has said, feed my sheep. I'm sending you in to bridge the gap. Your fears and self-desires and wounds and scars are nothing that will keep you from being my hands and feet. I have plans to prosper everybody, despite people like Potiphar's wife, who did Joseph so wrong. I know that as we contemplate our world, that no one on this earth has these answers. Why are there monsters in the world? Why do children shoot guns at their fellow students? It's like, but don't let any of this keep you from believing in God or giving your life to Him. It's better to face those challenges and perplexities with a faith in His higher power. He knows the questions and the struggles that each of us has. Don't quit before the miracle happens, before you get to witness the miracle. If Joseph had quit at those low points, he would not have been able to save his people in the future. Now, God would have found another way, in my opinion, if that's what the grand design was. But his grand design was Joseph, and Joseph remained faithful, and Joseph stayed with it. God can show you where He is even in your darkest times. Talk with Him in private from your innermost self and tell Him about your innermost experience. As vast and as timeless as He is, part of Him dwells in you, and He wants you to reach for that which is within all of us. Seek Him and you'll find His comfort and His love that's ever present and his acceptance. And he will be faithful in fulfilling all his promises, just as we sang in the song. For faithful, forever God is faithful. I wish you many blessings and peace this day and an awareness of his presence wherever you are in your life and whenever you're asking God, where are you? I'd like to close with the words um, from an older hymn that I have always loved. It looks not just to the past, but it looks forward as well. O God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, our shelter from the stormy blast, and our eternal home. Under the shadow of your throne, your saints have dwelt secure. Sufficient is your arm alone, and our defense is sure. Before the hills in order stood, or earth received her frame, from everlasting you are God, to endless years the same. 1,000 ages in your sight are like an evening gone, short as the watch that ends the night before the rising sun. Time, like an ever-rolling stream, bears all of us away. We fly forgotten as a dream dies at the dawn of day. O God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, be now our guide while life shall last, and our eternal home. Amen.